Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com, for more info. Email me through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is internationally syndicated solely due to the love and support that you all continue to give. We're available across all major distributors, and as long as you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in, because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Karla Sutton-McKinney. And we're going to be discussing Karla's amazing book, Summer of 2020. It's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a whole host of other places. Man, I'm telling you, start by typing it into a search bar, and you're going to be greeted with all of them. And this is one that is going to have a particular connection to you, because every single one of us listening in right now, when we hear that date, summer of 2020, man, it's almost been seared into our brains in terms of what that means, where we were, and what was happening in the world around us. Before I go any further, I want to quickly point out the fact that Karla was brought to us by one of the best publishing firms in the business, Citi of Books. So for my writers out there who have gone through their process, if you need some assistance moving that masterpiece you developed, you got to contact Citi of Books, people. This is what they specialize in. Head on over to cityofbooks.com and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, as I mentioned, summer of 2020, man, it had a lot going on. It was a world choking under lockdown, streets empty, but hearts were racing. The virus pretty much rewired life. And then a spark. And I remember it, man, because it was a very specific time. Living in Los Angeles, there was a lot happening. And when it comes to police brutality, but specifically George Floyd's murder, it ignited a firestorm, filling those same empty streets that I mentioned a moment ago with screams, with sirens, and a collective roar for justice. It was a season that was, it was unlike any other, man. It was a season filled with masks and also megaphones, right? Of isolation and of uprising, where grief and fury collided in a demand to be seen. This is going to be a book that is so much larger than a memoir. Now, we're going to be hearing things from Karla's perspective, from her voice, from her life, but it is going to resonate with each and every one of you. I'm telling you, this book isn't just a record of that summer. It's a reckoning that still burns today, and a lot of questions that we had then, unfortunately, haven't been answered. And this is a deeper discussion, one that is much deeper than a 20-minute discussion, but we're going to get it started. Now sit back and strap in. Karla, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, and I am excited and pleased to be present today and to just share any information I can today regarding summer of 2020.
I love that. Listen, we are thoroughly looking forward to this discussion. What you have comprised is something magnificent, something that I think is, like I mentioned in the opening, still fresh on so many of our minds. And there's a larger discussion that needs to be had here, but a book like this is going to start it. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for being here with us to discuss it all. Let's start off with learning a little bit more about you and your background. Tell us more about yourself, Karla.
Yes, grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, went to the Hazelwood School Districts, got married, a military man, and did some traveling. I have a background in education. I taught at alternative school in Kansas City, Missouri as a math teacher. Trauma sensitive was the background of the school. We had a lot of young people some who had gone through the system, being raised in what I call a second-tier home, meaning with their grandparents. So we had a lot of young people who were dealing with trauma. And math teacher, I learned a lot during that time. I enjoyed it, and I'm not teaching at the moment. We moved to Memphis, Tennessee during the summer of 2020. We moved during the pandemic. My husband had retired from the military, so we moved here. It split the difference between our homes. His was Mobile, Alabama. Like I said, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, so Memphis got the nod. We moved here. He went on to teach JRTC at a high school, and I decided to go back to school to my master's in education and leadership. And rather than go back into the school system, I've just found myself very active in some of the organizations here that are fighting for better education for our young people. Public School Strong, Save Our Students, MICA, which is Memphis Interfaith Coalition of Action and Hope, helping with their education task force and things of that nature. So that's a little bit about me. Writing was not my background. Although I had been writing since 1999, my first piece was Just As I Am, written to a cousin of mine. That was something I did to kind of share my feelings and my thoughts about events. And then when the summer of 22 came around, I found myself writing for 90 days straight, just small pieces. And I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but writing and poetry was not my background. It just came about as I began to learn more about myself.
Listen, Karla, thank you very much for articulating all of that. It wouldn't make sense to go anywhere else, right? You've already started to go there and to dive a little more into this inspiration here. Now, clearly, given everything that was happening around the world, but especially here in the States, in that time, in that summer of 2020, I can see or potentially assume why you drifted towards writing. And poetry became a way of expressing yourself and sharing your voice. But listen, A, that could be a piece of it. There may be more. But also B, okay, this could have just stayed on your personal shelf. You didn't have to take it a step forward and publish the book for the world to now be able to go along on that drive with you. So all collectively falling under the umbrella of inspiration, but in multiple forms. What inspired you to write? What inspired you to collect all of your thoughts into this book? And then finally, what inspired you to put it out for the world?
Yes. As I sat in that space and in that moment, I did not watch the videos and anything going on that happened to Mr. George Floyd. But everything in me just welled up. So I just began to write. And like I said, from June 1st all the way through August, every day, the Lord gave me something to articulate regarding my feeling. What I was probably most concerned about is the silence of believers. Not enough, from my perspective, did I hear the church standing up and denouncing the act. Too many people were silent. So when I began writing, and although I had been writing for years, there's a conversation that needs to be had amongst believers about those who say that they're following after Christ. You got to ask yourself where you are when injustices like this happen. So when I finished writing, and I said in the day that I started writing, I said I was going to publish it because I want people to read it. I want to help bring yourself into account about where you position yourself when injustices happen. It doesn't just happen to other people. It happens to us.
Yeah.
We are called to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. That's my call. I can't do it. And this book is a part of being responsible. God said it's time. Stop being silent.
Karla, okay. So listen, you brought up a great point and something that was connected to the book that I thought was so powerful because you mentioned the phrase from speechless to responsive. And I think it flows perfectly with what you just gave. I'm curious to know, because obviously when you hear that, speechless to responsive, that suggests the transformation, right? That's some type of metamorphosis, some change has happened. Have readers shared how your work moved them from silence to action, or at least how your work has inspired silence to at least articulation?
articulation has happened. Now, I'm going to be very honest.
Oh, let's go. Speak on it.
This calls for people to go to spaces that they've not gone before.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen overnight. When you read this, silence is, and I don't really talk about the black and white issue in the book directly. And I said this in my, I don't know if it's in the foreword, in the back, I mentioned that what we experienced in the summer of 2020 with George Floyd was created by an atmosphere of the black and white. There are all other races in between. But that thing came to a head with, this book was written with black and white in my mind. So what it has caused people to do is to really think. But I'm still not hearing the conversation and people really ready to move and stand up the way not that I want them, that they're called to do. There's conversation, but it's not enough. And that is not just for my white brothers and sisters, also for my black brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
We're not talking about this in the right way. We just talk amongst ourselves. We have to have conversation with those that we struggle with. That's the only way we're going to get it done, and we're going to do it better.
I love that. Karla, I'm telling you, you are speaking the gospel right now, and I'm right there with you. I love what you're saying. People, this is why you got to pick up copies of this book. I'm telling you, we're scratching the surface here, but it's like an iceberg, man. We're getting the very tip of it, but there is so much below the surface of the water, and you got to pick up copies of the book because that's the only way to get to it. We're not going to cover it all. I don't want to cover it all. Not that I don't want to sit here and talk to her for hours, because I think it's powerful enough to do, but the responsibility falls on you. So you got to head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You got to pick up copies of Summer of 2020 and get invested yourself, because I think that is something that is truly key to this process, to the conversations that she is talking about. Man, there's some deep reflection. And sometimes looking through someone else's eyes can almost help paint a more vivid reflection of yourself, right? And back to yourself. Yeah. So I firmly believe it. This is a book that you need to add to your shelf. Head on over and pick it up. Karla, I want to continue to dive down this rabbit hole of honesty, right? Because I think, man, listen, we're not trying to ruffle some feathers here, but yeah, listen, if we got to ruffle some feathers, we're going to ruffle some feathers, Karla, okay? Now, something else that you mentioned that I'm very intrigued by is you talk about the phrase, only two on who the events of 2020 were planned. Now, Karla, that is intriguing. I feel like there is a lot there. Now, without giving too much away, can you elaborate on this duality in the book?
Yes. There have been many different cultures, and I have moved from using the word race, because that's just my own evolving. I've moved away from using the word race. But on two, when I think about that event, I think about George Floyd's murder. You think about that being allowed to be okay because of the history of our country.
Yeah.
It's just been okay. There are events going on today that are clear in their presentation that black and brown people, black America in particular, can be handled any way that the upper echelon, if I can say that, believe that we should be handled without any consequences. We have these pockets of where justice stands firm, it stands true, it rights the wrong. But more than not do we have evidence that if it's possible for black America to be kept subjective to those in power, then that will happen. And it's more than just about black and white. It goes into this whole thing of power and money, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I sit and I think about what happened and the officer being so comfortable in his actions. And that's where that statement came from. Yet, too, on who the events of 2020 were planned. That was I look at that and it takes me back to all that Black and brown people have suffered. It just took me back.
Yeah.
That in public, you could kill someone. We can go and talk about picnics at hangings. There are conversations that can be had. So that's where that statement was birthed out of, is that very moment. And looking back at the struggle of Black America to get to where we are today. Not that we haven't moved forward, but if something like that could happen in 2020, then we yet have a long way to go.
Absolutely. Karla, look, I'm an optimist, okay? So first and foremost, I recognize that the world has shifted massively from when my grandmother was growing up here to when my parents were growing up here to where myself, my brothers have grown up to, and where my children will ultimately grow up in. So I'm an optimist, and I recognize that we have made strides and moved forward. But I also recognize, like you said, that there is a lot of work still to be done, and there is a lot of deep-seated hatred, racism, so many other isms you want to put out there, because this is not just a race thing, but it is intricately stitched into the fabric of this country that it peers its head every now and then, and you recognize it. Or if you're someone like myself, I'm a Black man raised in this country, I wasn't able to avoid it. Even in moments where it was like I was around some of my closest friends growing up, like, again, always met with positive intent, but racism was always there, right? It would always come out in certain ways. Like, I remember being in school when I was like in the 5th grade and just random like kids in the class, oh, can I touch your hair? What the hell do you mean? And again, when I was in the 5th grade, okay, sure, I guess. It was confusing. It was a little odd, but I didn't look at it like, oh, this is but as I got older and I look back, I'm like, there are things here at play that are deeply stitched. Another thing that we've seen, or at least that I've seen, I don't know how widespread this movement is, but I know it has caught some traction, is you'll see things appearing now on social media posts about this quote unquote Black fatigue. And that's something that, man, it really irritates me. And again, it's a privilege that a lot of these people are able to showcase. And again, I try not to get too embedded into it, but it plays into a lot in terms of the cycles that we see and that we have seen throughout history. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to see. I want to follow all of this up as we start to conclude the interview now. How does your poetry, or even your writing, not just your poetry, but just your writing in general, speak to this weariness, while also resisting the despair that threatens to silence voices? Do you see your work as a kind of rest, a rebellion, or potentially both?
It's definitely not a rest. I don't see it as a rest. I see it as a rebellion. Black fatigue. People who believe that they have been in some way, I don't know, pushed aside, it's easy for you to use that word.
Yeah.
What are you fatigued about?
Mm-hmm.
Fatigued about people who say enough is enough, and until you right the wrongs, until justice looks like justice should look, we're going to, people, not just Black people, but people will continue to speak up. So I see that term is new to me because I don't spend a whole lot of time on social media that way. But as you say that, this is not about rest.
Yeah.
If you're fatigued by what's going on, you're going to be upset if you read this because I'm calling it out yet again. I want you who say that you're fatigued, I need you to read this so you can get an understanding about what we've been tired of all our lives. And even those of us who live in spaces where we live, it's still something that we wear on our shoulders, on our bodies, not because we choose to, because it's just what it is. I've had conversations with ladies and friends who, things that I've said, and they say, those things don't ever cross my mind. You doesn't. So you don't understand. Even as an adult, I still have had individuals ask me, can they touch my hair? And I'm like, what is that?
Right.
And sometimes I don't even know how to respond, Benji. I'm dumbfounded that this is where people still are. So as long as people are still there, then you're going to be black fatigued until it's no longer.
Karla, you started to go into this already, but I'm going to ask, 'cause I want to double down. I want to really crystallize it here, because I agree. Listen, this book, as much as it's for people that are already supportive of your message, his book is probably even more powerful and more needed in communities that are against it. But I want to ask, because I want to hear it directly from you, who would you say is your intended reader of this book, and what is the main message that you hope they take from it after they've concluded?
My main reader of the audience that I want to touch are my Christian brothers and sisters. That's who I want to touch. What I want them to do, I want the church to know that we are too silent. We cannot wait until something happens and then respond. We are not as vocal, we are not as active as we need to be in our communities, that we could help abate some of these actions that happen, because we're going to stand up, let authorities know that we're in our communities, we're doing our own work, we're going to come to the rescue of our own communities, we're going to do the work. But we have found ourselves in these structures ministering to those who are already there, and there's a whole world out here that is lost. Yeah. What this book is meant to do is to call into account to people who say they live justice, but they're not out there helping, that justice is served on the least of these. You need to get up and do more than say, I'm a Christian. I need to see you doing the work and speaking up.
Karla, please read one of your poems for us as we close out.
Yes, certainly. So I will be reading July 14th. This particular piece speaks directly to what George Floyd's murder and death, what I heard in this moment. Justice did not stain the pavement. Justice did make a statement. In me, you laid. In me, you prayed. In me, you clave. In me, you gave your life. Justice saw, the world sees. Justice states, you breathe. And just to share, justice in this poem is representative of Jesus. And it's to let us know that George Floyd may not be breathing on this side, but he is breathing with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Thank you.
People, listen, I often like to close out of my shows offering a reflection or some type of spiel. It's not even appropriate to do that in this instance. The discussion that we've already had was powerful. That poem that she just concluded with was even more. You know where you gotta go. I'm going to say it for you again. That's going to be the last thing I'm going to say. It's Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble. The book is called Summer of 2020 by Karla Sutton-McKinney. Head on over there. Pick up your copies today. If this discussion hasn't moved you, take a long look in the mirror, man, and reflect, because you might just be part of that problem. If it has, all the more reason to pick up this book, man. This is one that's going to help bring some things into a much clearer perspective for you. You know where to go. Karla, this has been an absolute honor. Such a pleasure. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you. Glad to be here.